Good day, everyone. My name is Charlene. Welcome to Facilitating Learning EdUp 211. In this first lesson, I will be giving you a brief introduction about what facilitating learning is all about. We have four learning objectives. First is to explain the meaning and origin of facilitating learning. Second is to discuss about the nature of learning. Third is to identify and differentiate the seven kinds of learning. And fourth is to apply the eight metaphors of teaching and understand each of its implications. So, what does facilitating learning mean? Facilitating came from the Latin word facis, which means easy or easy to do. It also means to make something convenient, easy to manage, or favorable. Facilitating learning is an approach where students are encouraged by their teachers to take ownership and control of their own learning process. So, in short, facilitating learning means helping students acquire knowledge and skills by teaching them based on instructions of experience. Therefore, the role of the teacher changes from being the supplier of knowledge to being a facilitator of the learning process. For example, you are a science teacher and you want your students to learn about the life cycle of a plant. So instead of immediately providing your students with a lecture about plants, you will first ask them to make an experiment using the mango seeds in advance and record the progress. Once there is already a progress, you will ask the students to make a report about their experiment. After the reporting, you will then supplement their observations with your lecture to create a structure of what they learned. Learning is defined as any relative permanent change in behavior that occurs as a result of practice and experience. Based on the meaning of the word learning, we can extract three important elements. One, learning is a change in behavior. Two, learning is a constant change that takes place through practice or experience. And this change in behavior must be relatively permanent and must last a long time. In order for learning to take place, simple or complex mental and physical activities must be present. The activities learned by an individual, may be habits, skills, or facts, are called the types of learning. There are seven different kinds of learning. First, we have the motor learning, which is the process of acquiring and perfecting motor skills and movements, either simple acts or complex sequences of movements. It refers to the day-to-day motor activities that an individual has to learn in order to maintain a regular life, such as walking, running, driving, and climbing. Next, we have the verbal learning. It is a type of learning that involves the language that we speak, which is used for communication. Verbal communication is a type of oral communication wherein the message is transmitted through spoken words. The sender gives words to his feelings, thoughts, ideas, and opinions and expresses them in the form of speeches, discussions, presentations, and conversations. It is not limited only to the words that we speak. For others, they also use communication devices, signs, pictures, symbols, and sounds to learn. Atypically developing learners, such as those who are visually impaired, the instructor uses Braille to teach them new information. On the other hand, instructors use sign language to communicate to those students with hearing impairment. Next, we have concept learning, which is a type of learning that requires higher mental processes such as thinking, reasoning, and intelligence. Therefore, it is useful in the recognition and identification of things. It involves two processes, namely abstraction, which is a general concept or idea rather than something concrete or tangible, and generalization, which is the tendency to respond the same way to different but similar stimuli. One example we have here is a father showing a picture of a dog to his child and attaches the term dog to refer to that particular animal. So when the child finally sees an actual dog, she was able to recognize it based on its physical attributes, such as having four legs and a tail. Discrimination learning is a type of learning that takes place when a learner is able to differentiate between stimuli and showing an appropriate response to these stimuli. For example, the learner is able to identify and differentiate between the sounds of different musical instruments, such as the piano, violin, trumpet, guitar, and the harp. The learning of principles involves individuals learning principles that are related to science, mathematics, grammar, etc. in order to work effectively. It always shows relationships between two or more concepts. For example, we have formulae such as force is equal to mass times acceleration. We have laws such as Newton's laws of motion. We have associations as well as correlations. Problem solving is a type of learning that uses cognitive abilities such as thinking, reasoning, observation, imagination, and generalization. The picture shows the important steps we can take in order to effectively solve a problem. So first, we need to define the problem. Next, we need to brainstorm solutions, and after that, we will pick a solution, and then we will implement the solution, and finally, we will review the results. In order to learn what attitude learning is, we first need to define what attitude means. Attitude is a predisposition which determines and directs an individual's behavior. Each individual develops different attitudes from their childhood about the people, objects, and everything that he or she knows. For example, a student who was inspired by his teacher decided to pursue a career in education later in life so that he can also inspire others in the same way his teacher inspired him. He said, I teach because I'm still inspired by a great teacher I had when I was a kid. So, I get that what we do every single day truly matters. Let us move on to the metaphors of teaching. Metaphor refers to a figure of speech in which a term or phrase is applied to something to which it is not literally applicable in order to suggest a resemblance. We have 8 metaphors of teaching. We should keep in mind that no one metaphor is correct, but each represents a different understanding. Each metaphor has its own implication. Learning as transfer implies that knowledge is portable stuff that can be passed around and the learner is a container. Instructors should teach the students all the information that is required for them to know about a particular lesson, and through this, they are able to transfer their knowledge to their students. Learning as connective change implies that observable behaviors can be changed by the instructor that needs to have objectives in terms of the desired end behaviors of the learner. Instructors should deliver their lessons clearly and share intelligible opinions to their students. Although they may have the tendency to teach a totally different point of view, they should still emphasize the actual information that the learners need to know. Learning as computing implies that the mind is a computer that processes large quantities of data. Learning is a process of reprogramming mental structures. Educators should provide learners with the information they think are critical to their learning without expecting them to be able to retain all the information they were taught in an instant. Learning as building connections implies that the human brain is like a neural network where learning is the strengthening or weakening of pathways of neurons. Neurons, also known as nerve cells in the brain, generally function by interacting with each other in order to communicate and process information based on what we see, hear, touch, taste, move, and think. Instructors should provide the learners the prerequisite knowledge that they need to learn in order for them to be able to make meaning of what they are learning. So, for example, you, as the educator, have given all the needed information to your students for the final exams. Now it is up to them if they are going to study to enhance their knowledge to strengthen what they already know. Learning as self-organization implies that humans are self-organizing adaptive system that continuously produces its own components and organization in the context of being embodied and embedded in a culture and history. Learning is the emergence of new knowledge based on all these contextual factors. Educators should teach lessons based on their students' level and not the level that is expected based on other countries. So, for example, you are a reading teacher in the Philippines. When you are introducing or teaching kindergarten students new words that starts with the letter A, the question is, are you going to teach them the word antelope or alimango? Of course, you will say alimango because this is what students are more familiar with in the Filipino context. Learning as propagation implies that cultural ideas are transmitted through humans who act as hosts and transmitters of these ideas. Instructors should disseminate information that they know and stand by without creating bias to their students. Example, you are a history teacher and you hold bias when it comes to Spaniards. Therefore, you have the tendency to give emphasis on how the Spaniards colonized and held their power among the Filipino people. However, you have also forgotten the positive influence that they brought to the Philippines when it comes to culture and tradition. So you only end up educating the students based on how you view the Spaniards and not see the other point of view of the story. You should always remember to teach without creating bias. Learning as coordination implies that knowledge is distributed and does not reside within any individual. Educators should strive to be more knowledgeable about a topic and to be able to teach it well and not only be contented with what they already know because teaching is a continuous process of learning. For example, you are a biology teacher, and instead of teaching what you have previously learned, you continue to read updated books and papers regarding the topic that you will be discussing. You still strive to be more knowledgeable about your topic so that you can teach it effectively to your students. Finally, learning as participation implies that learning is also distributed, but is also found in the social interaction among individual learners. It is always associated with the community and happens through joint actions. Learning takes place when two or more people exchange ideas. Educators should encourage learners to interact with others in the class and to create intellectual noises during the class. Example, you can do this by encouraging learners to form a study group where they can be given the chance to discuss the topics among themselves. You can also ask them to make a research paper regarding a topic and let them present it to the class to engage in the teaching learning process. Thank you all for listening. And just a word of inspiration, a good teacher can inspire hope, ignite the imagination, and instill a love of learning, by the words of Brad Henry Love. I'll see you in my next video. Have a nice day.